The Ryzen 5 5600X3D is finally here, and I think it's a tough sell. So let's talk about it. This is one of the chips that everybody's been waiting for ever since AMD announced X3D V-Cache. All the way back at CES when they showed off a 12-core version. People want to have an affordable way to get one of the fastest gaming processors out on the market. And after having some time with the 5800X3D, I'm ready to answer whether or not it can be that for people who are still on AMD's last-gen platform of AM4. Because if you're still on a B450 Ryzen 5 2600X, you might be interested in potentially just swapping out your CPU as opposed to making a large platform upgrade to something like Ryzen 7000, which will require a new motherboard and RAM. But the first thing that the 5600X3D has against it is the fact that it will be a Micro Center retail exclusive. And I love Micro Center. They're the ones who actually partnered with us to send us the chip to do this review in the first place. But unfortunately, the reality is with the 25 stores that they have nationwide, the Indianapolis store coming this summer, they are still not within a reasonable distance of the vast majority of the population here in the United States. And that means that this is going to be for the few people who are blessed enough to have a Micro Center store within driving distance of them, or are willing to make like a plane flight to go to one. But from what we've heard from Micro Center as well as AMD, this is going to be a limited run chip. Now, they didn't give me the specifics of what exactly is going on with the 5600X3D, but my imagination seems to indicate to me that this is a 5800X3D that couldn't quite make the quality control, and so they disabled some of the cores and then they shipped it as a 5600X3D. Which now is a good time to talk about the specs of this chip. It is 6 cores and 12 threads. It has a base clock of 3.3 gigahertz and a boost clock of 4.4 gigahertz. It has that level 3 cache, the 3D V-Cache, coming in at 96 megabytes with a total of 99 megabytes on the whole chip, including L1 and L2. You cannot overclock this thing. We've seen issues with X3D chip overclocking recently, and it comes in at 105 watt TDP with no cooler included in the box, so you are going to need your own cooling solution for it as well. And the retail price that Micro Center is going to be launching this at is $229.99. They will have a couple of bundles for you in case you want to pick it up with RAM and motherboard. You can get that for just $100 more at $329.99, or they'll have a full power spec PC with a 6650 XT and everything else going for $850. And after taking the time to benchmark this in a variety of real world scenarios, not necessarily pairing it up with something like an RTX 4090 to see how much faster this chip is over the 5600X, but a more realistic understanding of what GPUs would people be pairing this CPU with, what systems are people likely to have. And I have to say that I think the 5600X3D suffers from the fact that it is coming out so late and there are so many other valuable options, even in Micro Center's own store. Realistically, I think the 5600X3D is for somebody who's going to be on AM4 already and is looking to swap in a new chip. I do not think it is reasonable for people to build a brand new PC with the 5600X3D, and I'll explain why with the benchmarks that we did run. So we tested it with 2 different GPUs. I did an RTX 4070 run as well as an RTX 4060 run. Because this is a mid-tier chip, it's likely going to be partnered with a mid-tier card, and if you're going to be rocking something like a 4080, 4090, 7900 XT, you're probably going to want to spring for a higher end processor in the first place to keep a little bit more parity. And for comparison, I tested it against the 5600X, the 5800X3D, as well as the Ryzen 5 7600, because it comes in at roughly the same price point as the 5600X3D does. And what I found in my testing is that in both 1080p and 1440p, the most likely resolutions for the 4070, that the 5600X was the worst performing, the 5600X3D came in slightly above that, the 5800X3D came in slightly above that, and the 7600 beat them all with its 5 gigahertz clock speed. Whether in CPU-bound titles like CSGO or more AAA titles like Cyberpunk, the 5600X3D is firmly middle of the pack with what are the available options right now on the market. Compared to the 5600X, you can expect potentially up to a 10 to 15% bump in certain games on the 5600X3D, but then that is overshadowed by the fact that the 5800X3D, which goes for $289.99 on Micro Center's site, is still faster than that still. And again, this is with the 4070. When we knock it down to something like the RTX 4060, there is basically no difference between the 5600X and the 5600X 3D. At most, I saw 4% at 1080p high in Cyberpunk versus the 5600X and the 5600X 3D. And you're more than likely gonna see higher performance gains on the 5600X 3D versus the non-3D version, the higher end GPU you have. If you go up to a 6950 XT, 7900 XTX, that gap is going to widen, but again, you're more than likely going to be on an i7, i9, Ryzen 7, or Ryzen 9. In a reasonable build, the 5600X 3D is better than the 5600X, but we have to look at where all of these chips fall in the market. As mentioned, the 5800X 3D comes in for only $60 more than the 5600X 3D. The 5600X comes in $70 cheaper than the 5600X 3D. And the 7600 comes in at $20 cheaper than the 5600X 3D. Now, the issue with the 7600 is the fact that you can't just buy the CPU. So the X3D chip does have the added advantage that you can swap it into an AM4 motherboard with DDR4 RAM, and you'll be good to go. And that is the only scenario where I think that the X3D does make sense, is if you're already on an existing platform. But if you're upgrading everything anyways, even with Micro Center's bundle of $330 for the RAM, motherboard, and CPU, you can get very close to that with the 7600. You add in their cheapest AM5 motherboard, which comes in at $140. You add in their cheapest level of 16 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM, you're looking at $45 there, and you're at $395 for the Ryzen 7000 versus the $330 on the 5600X 3D. A small price difference for a lot of performance being added in by the 7600. But it gets even worse when you consider the fact that soon A620 motherboards should roll out to Micro Center, and other retailers already have them going for as low as $85. And if you're willing to go with an A620 with the 7600, then you're looking at $340 for that, which is $10 more than the 5600X 3D combo, which means that the 7600 is a no-brainer if you're swapping everything out in the first place. Now, if the 5600X 3D had launched back when the 5800X 3D did, it would make a lot more sense at this price point, because for $230, you're getting a lot of extra performance over a base level 5600 or anything before that, 3600, 2600. The 5600X 3D is going to make for a great upgrade. And back when the 5800X 3D came out, that was priced at $400. So it wasn't as sensible to just go up to the 8-core version. But considering the fact that the 5800X 3D with its 8 cores is still faster than the 5600X 3D, and the fact that the Ryzen 7000 series is still faster than the 5600X 3D, there is little sense in spending $230 on this chip. I think if it came in at the $200 price point, it would be a much more obvious buy. But I think this CPU only makes sense if you're coming from a Ryzen 2000 or 3000 series and you don't want to spend $290 on the 5800X 3D. If $230 is your max budget, then this chip does make a lot of sense, but you could save $70 by going with the 5600X and get roughly the same performance on a sensible graphics card. In theory, the 5600X 3D might be faster than what I'm presenting here, especially if you pair it with a higher end GPU to really test how much you can get out of it. But in the real world, it's not that much better. Unless you're on a high-end graphics card, which again, I still don't think makes a lot of sense for Ryzen 5, the 5600X 3D just seems like too little, too late. It's probably going to sell out because there are limited quantities of them at Micro Center, but I would have to say that I wouldn't be one of the people rushing out to buy them. But don't you worry, in case you can't get your hands on a 5600X 3D, we are going to be giving away the PC that we built with the 5600X 3D in this Fractal Terra case. It's going to have an RTX 4060, so you can get subscribed and we'll keep you updated on when that giveaway actually does take place. Let me know what you think of the 5600X 3D. What do you think of its price point of $230? What do you think of it in competition with the rest of the CPUs out on the market? And what do you think about it being a Micro Center exclusive? I'm keen to hear from you down below in the comments, and we'll see you in the next video, my friends.